Rock the house Santa. Santa.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I go on and on and on.
Uh, once again,
Check it out, check it out, check it out, check it out.
coming to you live and direct from ground zero of the kangaroo apocalypse.
Rock on, rock.
This is your host, the mighty Sun Cypher. And you are now in tune with Black Dot Chronicles.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
So the Sound Lab,
This out here, this out here, this out here, this out here. Wing out, baby, wing out, baby.
that's the front line. Welcoming each and every one of you
Check it out, check it out, check it out.
into my zone. Just know that when you're in tune with Black Dot Chronicles,
My man.
your mind is your home.
For real, for real, for real. The daddy
So we can
rock,
all
daddy
roam
rock, daddy rock.
while we recline
Dr. Frank
and go on this
with the monster rhyme.
mental walkabout. Shout out to all my black fellas.
Check it out, check it out, check it out. That futuristic shit.
Finally, we're going to continue on this monumental work that I have entitled Crypto Cult, Dark Side of the Moon.
I go on and on and on. Just
I'm going to say that again. This is the pivotal piece of all pieces of work that I've done so far to date. Crypto Cult, Dark Side of the Moon. So sit back, relax, enjoy this ride. We're going to get into it. I'm going to let y'all vibe out for a minute, and then we're going hard in the paint. Yeah. Yeah. And we are back. Now, as I was saying, it's been quite a minute since I've done my last installation in this Crypto Cult series, Dark Side of the Moon. But the last time I was with you, we fell into Crypto Cult Profane Origins, Birth of the Deplorable Class, aka the would-be elite. So we got a part 2 for that one. But just in case, for those of you guys, and that's probably most people honestly, who haven't checked out this groundbreaking research, as I'm calling it, you might want to go back and check this out. So the first part in the series is called Crypto Cult, Dark Side of the Moon, and this one was the Digital Asset Trojan Horse. This is the first part where I'm just essentially breaking down what I observed and then went about the business of documenting regarding the blockchain, the players on the blockchain, how ultimately there is a grand plan to use the blockchain as the new frontier for colonization. But this time is not about black and brown. This is a colonization of your mind, your body, and your spirit, your very soul, irregardless of the color of your skin. So the blockchain is the conduit in which this will be used. And in the digital asset Trojan horse, I'm essentially telling you that these cryptocurrency projects, especially the ones that are all about centralization, are the Trojan horse. The blockchain is the Trojan horse. Bitcoin, Trojan horse. XLM, Trojan horse. XRP, Trojan horse. Now, again, if you haven't seen my work, don't at me, all right? I'm not saying that the coins themselves are good or bad or evil or disagreeable. Their energy. I'm saying the individuals, the minds, the groups, the associations behind some of these blockchain projects, they are disagreeable actors and they intend to corral us all into this high-tech disagreeable frequency electromagnetic prison of futuristic hellish proportions. This is what is undertaking right now, and this didn't start yesterday or a year ago or a year and a half ago or even 10 years ago, okay? This is a plan that has been progressing through centuries and even millennia, but I really don't want to go back that far. All right? So on part one of Profane Origins, I showed you a chronology of this deplorable class, and we're going to pick that up. But if you haven't seen the original part one of Crypto Cult, which is the digital asset Trojan horse, I need you to go back and take a look at that. Then I hit you with, under the same title of Crypto Cult, I hit you with Creation Protocol, the God Code. Now to me, this is the most significant aspect of all of this work, simply because I laid a foundation for my perspective, my theory, and the formulas that I use in order to derive my theory. It's all broken down. It's like a legend or like a map of everything that I'm speaking about from then till now. And if you don't understand the framework that I'm speaking about within the God Code, then none of this shit is really going to make sense to you. There's a lot of knowledge that I drop speaking about esoteric knowledge and these hidden groups and these hidden hands that pervade every aspect of society that's rarely seen or heard. So please, if you do nothing else, go back and check out Creation Protocol. Alright? Now after Creation Protocol, I hit you with the elusive Satoshi Nakamoto. And in this presentation, I essentially just broke down who this mysterious character is that nobody seems to have ever seen or see, that is the founder of apparently the greatest revolution that's ever happened to the planet since 1,000 years, with this cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. This, I'm calling him fictitious character, Satoshi Nakamoto, I describe as being more of a military operation. So Satoshi Nakamoto is in fact the NSA, and we know the NSA is tied to all of the globalist deep state track and control agenda. They're at the heart of that. So I found enough evidence to I guess say with some credibility that Satoshi Nakamoto is in fact the NSA. And I actually, let me see if I can pull this up real quick. Alright, and just to give a quick refresher, this is one of the things that I spoke about on this particular clip. So this is my conspiracy equation. This is my hypothesis. And again, just go back and check the clip if you really want to get into the math of all of that, right? So I'm saying Satoshi Nakamoto is Bitcoin, right? He's the creator. That's the origin story. But what most people don't know, Bitcoin is NSA, okay? Which means Satoshi Nakamoto is NSA. NSA brought you the blockchain through Bitcoin, but NSA is not the progenitor of this technology. In this particular video, I break down the history of blockchain, some of the pioneers, the people that were doing it way before this fictitious character of Satoshi Nakamoto ever came onto the scene. All right, so I'm saying the blockchain is the Trojan horse. Trojan horse, obviously, is the New World Order. The New World Order is the mark of the beast. Okay, and I use these terms again, not being a religious figure or character or believer in much of anything. I only deal with what I know and my experience. So when I say mark of the beast, I'm literally speaking this in their own language or whatever. So I'm saying that Bitcoin itself is the Trojan horse, and the deplorable class are attempting to use the blockchain to subdue the masses so that we are forever controlled with these track and trace mechanisms. All right? And finally, my last installation, which was over a month ago, Crypto Cult, Dark Side of the Moon, Profane Origins, Birth of the Deplorable Class. And here we are. We're about to go into part 2 of this monumental work. And I really, really, really hope that everybody got their notes and pen and paper ready to go. And you're ready to get into it. So I think what I'm going to do, before we go back into the chronology of this deplorable class, and you can literally see through history how they've been planting these seeds and working behind the scenes, manipulating all kinds of affairs and all kinds of sovereign nations to ultimately attain this end result, which is world domination. They want one world order under their philosophy. And I'm telling you, their philosophy is based on pure, what we call in 3D terms, evil. All right? So before we get into that, I'm just going to show you this. And this, the reason why I'm showing you this first, because this is also part of that chronology, and this is one of their lieutenants in the game, your boy H.G. Wells. Now, obviously we know him for all of his books, you know, and a lot of his books were made into classic movies, or what they call classic movies back in the day. But don't get it twisted, H.G. Wells was an agent of this would-be elite deplorable class. He was one of their soldiers. He did their work. He presented their philosophy through cinema and through books. So he was one of their creatives, okay? So the full name of this book, The Open Conspiracy, Blueprint for World Revolution. So this is H.G. Wells' philosophy of how the world should be moving forward. And this was in 1828. So why I'm showing you this as we go through this list, this chronology of the profane origins of the deplorable class, I want you to keep these certain concepts in mind that I've highlighted here as we go through this, right? So the Open Conspiracy was Wells's blueprint for a world revolution. He regarded this book as his finished statement on the way the world ought to be ordered. Possibly, He underestimated or ignored the fact that it is often in the interest of subset of the human race to act against other subsets. Moreover, the emphasis on religion seems odd from a rationalist perspective. All right. So this is just an introduction, kind of giving more of his personal philosophy. I'll just read this one quote so you can hear it directly from the man's mouth, all right? This book states as plainly and clearly as possibly the essential ideas of my life, the perspective of my world. The subject of this book is the whole destiny of man. Who knew that H.G. Wells had such lofty goals, right? So if I could, I would put this book before every mind in the world. I would say, tell me where this is wrong, or tell me why you do not live after these principles. My idiom of thought may not be his. Will he forgive that for the sake of the substance I am putting before him? Will the reader at least try to understand before he refutes? A movement to realize the conceivable better state of the world must deny itself the advantages of secret methods and tactical insincerities. It must leave that to its adversaries. We must declare our end plainly from the outset and risk no misunderstanding of our procedure. Okay? So this is a globalist mentality. I spoke about these secret society and their secret ways and their secret language. So they speak openly in secret encoded language. So they can say the red bird flew across the lawn on Saturday under the light of a full moon. I'm just making this up. And they'll show you a picture of a red bird or a video of a red bird flying across the lawn and the moon in the background. And everybody's laughing, oh, wow, that's so cute, whatever. All of the ones who are in the know understand that there are multiple messages. There's a surface level message for the profane is what they call us, strangely enough, right? So that's a surface level message for us, and we're all cawing over the red bird and the moon in the background. But there is an esoteric secret message to the ones that are in. And if you understand the symbology based on color, based on words, based on geometry, all of these different tools that they use in order to create the fuckery that we're in dealing with at this moment, right? If you understand that they speak with multiple tongues whenever they're speaking to the masses, they're also speaking to their counterparts, letting them know how the plan is progressing or whatever. So this is what you're experiencing in what I just read. So I'll go down and read just like a couple more of his quotes, and then we'll keep it moving from there. But yeah, this is a good book to understand the playbook before the plays actually happen. So this is 1928. We're like, 7 years away? We're really almost 6 years away from the 100th anniversary of this book. All right? So the first chapter, we'll just read a couple of things here. The present crisis in human affairs, from H.G. Wells' perspective. The world is undergoing immense changes. Never before have the conditions of life changed so swiftly and enormously as they have changed for mankind in the last 50 years. We have been carried along with no means of measuring the increasing swiftness of the succession of events. We are only now beginning to realize the force and strength of the storm of change that has come upon us. These changes have not come upon our world from without. No meteorite from outer space has struck our planet. There have been no overwhelming breaks of volcanic violence or strange epidemic diseases. Well, we know that's not true anymore. The sun has not flared up to excessive heat or violence or excessive heat or suddenly shrunken to plunge us into Arctic winter. The changes have come through men themselves, quite a small number of people. These esoteric, unelected societies that I've been telling you about, heedless of the ultimate consequence of what they did. One man here and the group there have made discoveries and produced and adopted inventions that have changed all the condition of social life. We are now just beginning to realize the nature of these changes, to find words and phrases for them and put them down. First, they begin to happen, and then we began to see that they were happening. And now we are beginning to see how these changes are connected together and to get the measure of their consequences. Okay? So what he's telling you, the secret group of this quite small number of men have been moving in the shadows for centuries, just so I can keep it in a relative close time. All right? For centuries, these men have been moving, building towards everything that's happening right now, everything that we think that's wrong with the world, or they're telling us that's wrong with the world, and they're giving you the solutions. You have to understand they planted the seeds and fermented. Okay? All of this. And you will see this. All right? So we are now just beginning to realize the nature of these changes, to find words and phrases for them and put them down. First they begin to happen, and then we began to see that they were happening, and now we are beginning to see how these changes are connected together and to get the measure of their consequences. Scroll down. All right? It was only in the beginning of the 20th century that people began to realize the real significance of that aspect of changing conditions, to which the phrase, the abolition of distance, has been applied. So here, I just highlighted this, so again, they're talking about centralization of everything. They've been, this has been their whole thing from the very beginning. They want to centralize everything, but they want these small group of of individuals to control these, of unelected officials. Okay? This is who they want to control this. So he's saying, the abolition of distance is how we're going to do this. All right? So I think there's one more thing. Is there one more thing down here I need to read? Hold on. Yep. All right. So, what does moral mean? Mores means manner and customs. Morality is the conduct of life. It is what we do. It is what we do with our social lives. It is how we deal with ourselves in relation to our fellow creatures. And there does seem to be a much greater discord now that there was a couple of 100 years ago between the prevailing ideas of how to carry on life and opportunities and a danger of the time. We are coming to see more and more plainly in certain established traditions which have made up the frame of human relationships for ages are not merely no longer as convenient as they were, but are positively injurious and dangerous. This is what he's talking about, sovereignty, essentially. And yet, as presented, we do not know how to shake off these traditions, these habits of social behavior which rules us. Still less we are able to state, and still less bring into operation the new conceptions of conduct and obligation that must replace them. So what you're seeing at the turn of the century is they're having a real problem with the issue of nationalism, patriotism, sovereignty, all things that they fake and feigned and tell us that this is all good and great, and they use this from an emotional perspective when they want to get certain things from us. They talk about sovereignty and patriotism and all this stuff like that, but ultimately they want to replace this. This is what they've gone about the business of doing from then to now. For example, the general government of human affairs has hitherto been distributed amongst a number of sovereign states. There are about 70 of them now. And until recently, that was quite tolerable. That was a quite tolerable system of frameworks into which a general way of living could be fitted. The standard of living may not have been as high as our present standards, but the social stability and assurance were greater. The young were trained to be loyal, law-regarding, patriotic, and a defined system of crimes and misdemeanors with properly associated pains, penalties, and repressions kept the social body together. So he's talking about the penal code, essentially. Everyone was taught a history glorifying his own state, and patriotism was chief amongst the virtues. Now, with great rapidity, there has been that abolition of distance, and everyone has become next door neighbor to everyone else. States once separate, social and economic systems formerly remote from one another, now jostle each other exasperatingly. Commerce under the new conditions is perpetually breaking nationalistic bounds and making militant raids upon the economic life of other countries. Let me read that again. Commerce under new conditions is perpetually breaking nationalistic bounds and making militant raids upon the economic life of other countries. So he's saying they're having inroads, their plan is working. We're breaking down these sovereign walls and shit. We're becoming one world. We're making the world smaller through all of these treaties and agreements and all of this shit like that, or whatever, again, through non-elected, non-governmental officials. These are who really run the world. They're just literally coming out of the closet now. This is a coming out party. All right? So it says this exacerbates patriotism in which we have all been trained and with which we are all, with scarcely an exception, saturated. And meanwhile, war, which was once a comparative slow bickering upon a front, has become war in 3 dimensions. It gets at the non-combatant almost searchingly as the combatant, and has acquired weapons of a stupendous cruelty and destructiveness. All right. So he's talking about everybody's got weapons now. We don't need everybody having weapons. We still need to make these cruel and destructive weapons, but the only difference is we ourselves need to be the one to control them. All right. So they want to do away with all of these small countries and all of these issues of sovereignty as related to that. And they want these small group of people, small hands in the pot, to control everything. And this is pretty much how everything runs. So let me just set up this next section real quick before we move forward. Give me 1 minute. I'm going to give you some chill out vibes, and then we'll get into this next section. You're in tune to Black Dot Chronicles. I am your host, the Mighty Sun Cypher, live inside the lab. And we are back. So the Sound Lab, and you are in the midst of this ongoing, groundbreaking research I've entitled Crypto Cult, Dark Side of the Moon. This is part 2 of Profane Origins, Birth of the Deplorable Class. So when we left off before, a month and a half ago, I was giving you a chronology of the takeover, chronology of the conspiracy. All right, and if you haven't peeped part 1, I suggest you go back and peep that afterwards so you know exactly what we're talking about. So we ended up with the CFR, or the Council of Foreign Relations. Let me just show you one more thing here so you get a clear idea of these scoundrels that I was just telling you about, right? So what you're looking at, this is what I call the anatomy of the beast agents, aka the deplorable class. Excuse me. Drink some water real quick. All right. So this is the anatomy of the beast agents. All right. So these are all the individuals and groups that form a web around this planet of deception and death and fear and lack, denial, opposite of truth, opposite of nature, opposite of creation. This is the web, okay? So all of these groups were formed, they just continue to form from the beginning of the Illuminati, founded by Weishaupt, up and through modern times, okay? So you have all of these actors like the CFR, the RAND Society, the Trilateral Commission, IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund, Ford Foundation, Royal Institute of International Affairs. You got groups like Bilderberger, the Club of Rome, which we'll get into the Club of Rome later. Skull and Bones. You got the Freemasons, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the World Bank, World Economic Forum, so on and so forth. And that's just to name a few. Now, mind you, every single institution that I name, private, nothing to do with government, individuals who just decided that they were going to start groups. And these are some of what we will call the most influential people in the world who populate these particular groups. And they go in between private sector and government, to nonprofit, to government, to private, so on and so forth. This is what they do. And cryptocurrency is a part of this. All right? Don't get it twisted. All of these same characters, all of these same hands, the groups that I just named to you, also should throw in the Lucis Trust. Okay? Lucis Trust is not on here, but this is another one of those non-elected, private, aristocratic fuck groups that control the progression of society behind the scenes and have been doing so for centuries. And that's just in the short view. All right? So I just wanted to show you guys that. These characters, okay, so I've shown you like a little intro with your boy H.G. Wells and his open conspiracy blueprint for a world revolution. Now I just showed you the characters and I highlighted some of the things that he was into. I'm showed you now some of the characters, the anatomy of these beast agents of the deplorable class. They're soldiers, they're lieutenants, they're generals, okay? Now we're going to go down and name them. Boom. So part 2 of history of the New World Order, or as I'm calling it, profane origins, birth of the deplorable class. In 1928 is when this book was written, the one that I just read from by H.G. Wells. Again, in 1933, he coins another book, The Shape of Things to Come, by H.G. Wells. Let's see what he says here. Wells predicts a Second World War around 1940. So it's so funny how all these white men, because this is what it is, these are mostly old white men with like a fraction of a percent, maybe black, brown, or yellow. But historically, these are old white men who seem to be such great prophets that they can, predict the future of all of these horrible events and things to come. So he predicts a Second World War by 1940, originating from German-Polish dispute. Wow, I wonder how he knew that. After 1945, there will be an increasing lack of public safety in criminally infected areas. The plan for the modern world state would succeed on its third attempt and come out of something that occurred in Barsa, Iraq. We know what happened there. I mean, think about this, yo. How is it possible in 1933, this dude has predicted every war going up to the Iraq War in 91? How is this possible that some random author can predict such vital information? Because he had insight, he already knew, because this was the plan all along. And you can clearly see here, they're using these wars as a pretext to destabilize the sovereignty of nations. And we know the banks are controlled by these small banking families that control the entire planet via the Federal Reserve and these private banks. Okay? So they controlled every single war. They've financed all sides of every war from the very beginning. Okay? So you can clearly see this is the playbook of the beast. They're telling you. I just want to show you this so nobody can say that, oh yeah, this motherfucker just making this shit up. Because sometimes when you're caught up in the moment and you don't do your research, you think that this fucking COVID shit just popped off out of nowhere from some fucking bats or some shit at some Chinese swap meet or whatever the fuck. When obviously that's not the case, but I digress. So, Wells predicts a Second World War around 1940, originating from German-Polish dispute after 1945. There will be an increasing lack of public safety in criminally affected areas. The plan for the modern world state would succeed in the third attempt and come out of something that occurred in Barca, Iraq. Okay? So think about what happened in 91. That initiated the war on terror. That was like a stage. Okay? We are now exiting out of the war on terror stage. Now it's the war against pandemic. This is the next stage. But they're telling you the problem. Their solution is to track and trace every single motherfucker, put poisons in our body that re-edit and recode our very DNA structure that never leave our body. And we have no idea what the ultimate outcomes are because there have been no tests done. Okay? So from 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, we're going to be hearing about the ill and adverse effects of this fucking global pandemic vaccination campaign has done to the masses of the people. Watch how many people become infertile, men and women. Look how the count goes down on the heads, because this is the ultimate outcome. They'll tell you this as I'll show you at the end of this clip. But let me keep going, all right? Although world government has been plainly coming for some years, although it had been endlessly feared and murmured against, it found no opposition anywhere. November 21st, 1933, in a letter to Colonel Edward M. House, President Franklin Roosevelt writes, "The real truth of the matter is, as you know and I know, that a financial element in the larger centers has owned the government since the days of Andrew Jackson." Jackson was like the second or third president or some shit. So he's basically saying from the beginning of the corporation United States of America, not the republic, because we know there were presidents, prior to, there were presidents of the republic, the prior three presidents of the republic before the founding of the corporation United States of America were all black men. I just thought I'd throw that in there, but we'll get into that later, okay? So, 1942, the Federal Council on Churches. This is all you see, step by step. They're laying the framework. These people don't move and, sporadic, projections and shit. They playing shit out in 50-year blocks, all right? They're playing the long game. That's why most of us can't see this shit coming. And they know that we're not going to research. So this is how they get off on us, all right? So 1942, an article in Time magazine chronicles the Federal Council of Churches, which later becomes the National Church Council of Churches, a part of the World Council of Churches, lending its way to efforts to establish a global authority. A meeting of the top officials of the council comes out in favor of a world government of delegated powers, strong immediate limitations on national sovereignty, international control of all armies and navies. Representatives of 30-some dominations assert that a new order of economic life is both imminent and imperative, a new order that is sure to come either through voluntary cooperation within the framework of democracy or through explosive revolution. Okay, 1942. Let's go to June 28th, 1945. This is your boy, Harry Truman. Truman endorsed world government in a speech which says, and I quote, "It will be just as easy for nations to get along in a republic of the world as it is for us to get along in a republic of the United States." So you see, most of your world leaders have been selling you out from the very beginning. And if you go back to the corporation of the United States, its inception, okay? Every single president that's not dead, that didn't get shot or mysteriously die in office, every single one of them proliferated this plan, this agenda. Every single one of them took part in building this out. Okay, it's just like the Death Star. I don't know if how many of you are sci-fi or Star Wars fans, but if you watch The Empire Strikes Back or whatever, you know that the Death Star wasn't built in one day. It took a long time on the cover, in the cut, in like the backwaters of the fucking galaxy and shit. They're building this Death Star, and this is similar to what's been going on with this deplorable class or whatever. So October 24th, 1945, Charter of the United Nations and Statute of the International Court of Justice. All right, this is really important. The United Nations Charter becomes effective also on October 24th. Senator Glenn Taylor, a Democrat, a douchecrat from Idaho, introduces Senate Resolution 183 calling upon U.S. Senate to go on record as favoring creation of a world republic, including international police force. Okay? So this was in 1945, all right? So at this point, the beast agents, they didn't have control yet. And I will just refer you over to the League of Nations. So the League of Nations was the predecessor to the United Nations, for those of you who don't know. Previous to the United Nations, I think the League of Nations was around for about 26 years, but let me just read this for you real quick. The League of Nations was the first worldwide intergovernmental organization whose principal mission was to maintain world peace. Lies. It was the opposite of that. Founded on 10th of Jan, 1920, following the Paris Peace Conference that ended the First World War. It ceased operation on April 20th, 1946. And the reason why, I won't get into all of that, I just wanted to read that real quick. The reason why the League of Nations never worked is because mainly the United States of America was not a signator of that League of Nations, because they understood that this shit was a takeover, that there was covert operatives, the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, who founded all of these fucking groups that had a plan to take over America along with the rest of the so-called free world. All right? So it only took them 26 years to change the mood or put the people in places, ruin enough nations, cause enough wars, make these countries dependent on these banks for these loans and shit. It only took 26 years from the founding of the League of Nations to the founding of the United Nations. All right? 26 years for them to clean the board so they can move forward into what we're now calling this Great Reset. All right, so it says, International Financier and CFR, again, another one of these cult groups that are privately owned and go about the business of creating culture for the planet, right? So James Warburg tells the Senate Foreign Relations Subcommittee, we shall have world government whether you like it or not. We should have world government whether you like it or not, by conquest or consent. So he's saying it's going to happen regardless. All y'all motherfuckers can do is fucking go along and get along, or you would be wiped off the map, essentially. All right? So 1950, Feb 9th, you got resolution number 66, okay? Senate Foreign Relations Subcommittee introduces Senate Concurrent Resolution number 66, which begins, whereas in order to achieve universal peace and justice, the present Charter of the United Nations should be changed to provide a true world government constitution. Okay? So again, esoteric subliminal language. The math is in what they're not telling you. And again, like I told you, these people are the opposite of nature. They're the opposite of this God force. Okay? So everything they're telling you, the truth is in the opposite direction. So if they're telling you they want this universal, to achieve universal peace and justice, it's not through the organic, natural means. It's not through unison and cohesion, fusion, as opposed to fiction. Okay? So what they're telling you, they have a completely different view and a completely different definition of what they call universal peace and justice. In their eyes, universal peace and justice means that you have like nobility and serfs, and there's nothing in between. When I talk about this futuristic, dystopian hellhole, super duper electronic track and trace, what I'm saying, like mad AI grid, Skynet don't even have nothing on this shit. If any of you seen The Matrix or whatever. It's not like this shit is coming, it's already here, and blockchain is proof of that shit. 5G, 6G, 7G networks are proof of that. You need these type frequencies not only to subsidize this next level of internet, and the bottom floor of this shit is called the Internet of Things, whereas everything and everybody will become a token on the blockchain. And if you know about the blockchain and cryptocurrency, distributed ledger technology, it's all immutable. It doesn't mean that you're traceable, but it's all immutable. All right? So what are they talking about here? The World Association of Parliamentarians for the World Government. So your government has already, just like all these other leaders of this world government, they've been signing your sovereignty away for years. Decade upon decade, they have been eroding your sovereignty through just a stroke of a pen while we've been living in all of this strife, all of this dissension amongst the ranks, all of this division, all of these lies. Okay? They got you thinking your black and brown brothers and sisters are your enemies. Why? The true enemies are these fascists. I said it many times and I'll say it again. Live free or die. It's the people versus the fascists, not the opposite. All right? So let me keep this going. So the World Association of Parliament for World Government draws up a map. All right? And this is like your new zones and shit. And what you've seen that with all of these treaties since the 90s, especially when Bill Clinton was in, and through the Bushes and all of that, through Obama, you've seen the world get smaller. Okay, you've seen all of these, how could you say, consolidation of all of these corporations all across the board in every single industry, in every single aspect of your life, and that will continue. All right, so this is designed to illustrate how foreign troops would occupy and police the 6 regions into which the United States and Canada will be divided as part of the world government plan. Hence, getting close to where we are right now. Okay, can you see how all of this is coming together? How they are seeking to destabilize sovereign nations. And how can they destabilize sovereign nations? The number one way is to have the sovereigns of this nation fighting against each other, distracted while they implement their plan, while they bring in the troops, both metaphorically, digitally, through these laws, all kinds of ways. They're bringing in the troops in order to take over this entire scenario. This is what you got to understand. 1954, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands establishes the Bilderberg. All right? So this is your boy that establishes the Bilderberg group. So as you can see, all of these secret groups and shit, and again, we wouldn't even know about Bilderberg group right now if it wasn't for your man's Alex Jones, who people mocked, laughed at, ridiculed, said that he was crazy, all this shit like that. You know what I'm saying? Through parties when he got kicked off of fucking YouTube and Twitter. Now where are we now? 2 years later. Where are we now? As all you people with these fucking vaccines, fucking righteous more than thou attitudes, as we see the real numbers, there's more people that have died from taking this shit than way before the vaccine started. Right? What's going on there? How is that? How come you gotta dig to see this information even though the CDC will tell you in plain sight? So that's that motherfucker Bernhardt. 1961, the U.S. State Department issues document 7277. The U.S. Senate Department issues document 7277 entitled Freedom from War, the U.S. Program for General and Complete Disarmament in Peaceful World. Now they're coming after your gats. So they started this shit in 61. You know what I'm saying? So what we like 60 years into that. 60 years into that, and they're still trying to get the gats. They got them for most of the world, but they don't got America under lock, and here's the problem. But let me keep going. All right? So it details a 3-stage plan to disarm all nations and arm the UN, with the final stage in which no state would have the military power to challenge the progressively strengthened UN peace force. This is why America never fucked with the League of Nations. Okay? And just because I've done this research, you know, and we'll get into this, but I know from the very beginning, you can clearly see from the formation of the Corporation of the United States, there was all of these different groups jockeying for power. And several of them had nothing to do with these secret societies that came over from Europe. So back in around, I guess like by the time of like the 18 whatever 30s, and around this time, around about the time Abraham Lincoln was coming into his political life, you had groups like the Whig Party and, you know, the National Democrats and National Republicans, all this other shit. But then you had also had a party called the Anti-Freemason Party. This is a party, in fact, this is the predecessor to the Whig Party. There was a group of fucking political men who felt so strongly against this secret group that's always lurking that they created a political party to try to extract them. Now, of course, they failed just like every other attempt has failed till date to extract these people, but here we stand. All right? So now you got your boy Quigley, Carroll Quigley. He's famous for another author who was read in. I'm sure he's a high-level ranking Freemason. You can't be even talking about this stuff unless you have bent over and, you know, do what they do. So Professor Carroll Quigley was Bill Clinton's mentor at Georgetown. So this is what he says in Tragedy and Hope. There does exist and has existed for a generation an international network which operates to some extent in the way the radical right believes the communists act. In fact, this network, which we may identify as the roundtable groups, those secret societies, has no aversion to cooperating with the communists or any other groups because they created them and frequently does so. Taliban, ISIS. I know of the operations of this network because I have studied it for 20 years and was permitted for 2 years in the early 1960s to examine its papers and secret records. I have no aversion to it. So he's saying, like, I'm not one of them, or I wasn't at the time. I'm telling you this because they allowed me to tell you this because they like to brag. Again, I'm reading between the lines. And by the way, I have no aversion to this shit, which means I don't mind the plan. Just throw that in there. He didn't even have to say that, right? He could have just kept talking and it would have been nonetheless. He could have just been, you know, doing his job. But he says, I have no aversion to it or to most of its aims and have for much of my life been close to it and to many of its instruments. So he's been like, you know, sucking on a nipple of these deplorable class his entire life and trying to get like them. So he was more than happy to be thrown his bone. I have objected both in the past and recently to few of its politics, But in generally, my chief difference of opinion is that it wishes to remain unknown. And I believe its role in history is significant enough to be known. You see what I'm saying here? Okay? Please go back and watch all of the creation protocol. It's probably about 5, 6 videos in that portion, in that chapter all up. But you got to go back and study that shit to understand this language that they're talking here. All right? Anyway, so boom. As I told you, every once in a while, like maybe like 1/1 millionth of a percent of the 1% where you see a black, brown, or yellow face. Again, we call these boule where I'm from, and that generally translates as advisors to the king. Shout out Steve Coakley. All right, so this guy here, Chester M. Pierce, in his keynote address to the Association for Childhood Education International, he states that every child in America, listen to this shit, all right? Every child in America entering school at the age of 5 is insane because he comes to school with certain allegiances towards our founding fathers, towards his parents, towards a belief in supernatural being. It's upon you, teachers, to make all of these sick children well by creating the international child of the future. Whoa. And you can go back. I mean, there's tons of quotes. You know, I remember the one chick. She was Surgeon General. You know, she thought it was a great idea to teach masturbation and shit like that to elementary school grade kids. Just crazy shit. All right. So this motherfucker is gonna say every child in America entering school at the age of 5 is insane because he comes to school with certain allegiances towards our founding fathers, towards his parents, toward a belief in a supernatural being. It's up to you, teachers, to make all these sick children well by creating international children of the future. That shit is so heavy. That shit, I mean, I've read this shit a million times and still that shit just knocks me off of my fucking chair every time. So these are your world leaders. These are the people who've been sculpting and planning meticulously your future in their eyes, based on whoever. And it's so funny, he talks about like belief in this supernatural being, but what about these beings that you believe in, homie? We're gonna get into that. I've got into that in earlier pieces. If you guys haven't seen it, I've alluded to this. All right, but we're gonna come full circle as we bring it back to the blockchain on these next chapters of Crypto Cult, Dark Side of the Moon. But let's keep going. 1973. Trilateral Commission formed. Your boy is the big new Brzezinski. He's one of these big trilateral heads as well. So you see you got these cliques of these private clubs of white men all over the world that are basically in alliance, but they're also jockeying for position because, you know, they're really into the material world. So all these 5 cents things matter to them, all right? And he's written books as well. The big new Brzezinski. Go check out his book. It's called The Grand Chessboard. And it literally lays out the framework for global domination and how they're downsizing, getting rid of sovereignty, and everybody who don't agree by persuasion, we dropping bombs. All right? So what is Rockefeller saying? Founds a new organization called the Trilateral Commission in 73, of which the official aim is to harmonize the political, economic, social, and cultural relations between the 3 major economic regions in the world, hence the name Trilateral. He invites future President Jimmy Carter to become one of the founding members, and it's a big new Brzezinski, and the organization's first director. So what you would see here, if you go back and look at the list, the who's who list of all of these little groups, you will see, especially from then to now, you were seeing they went from nobody to somebody. They've been tapped to carry out the agenda of this deplorable class. So your world leaders are selected, not elected. You know what I'm saying? If you don't know that by now, then you got a lot of makeup to do. Okay? So you see all these little groups that they plant these seeds of all these little individuals like Bill Gates, Anybody who's talking any shit right now about how the world should be made, Fauci's, all of these people sprung up out of all of these little private organization, Ford foundations, all of this shit, your Barack Obama, all of them, they all came from these people. They were fucking seated and, and bred for the very job that they're doing, which is to destabilize our very mind, body, and soul. Like I'm telling you, this is a war for your soul. That's the only energy that they cannot absolutely just take from you. So they have to create all of these diabolical ways through their technology in order to do that. All right? And then they talk about all of this, whatever this shit, the regions of the Trilateral Commission. But I'm not going to get into all of that because I want to keep this going. All right? So I think what we'll do is just take a time out here. And we're going to do a part 2. I'll leave you with some stellar beats for a minute. And then we'll come back. And we'll get more into this. This is Profane Origins, Birth of the Deplorable Class, Crypto Cult, Dark Side of the Moon, and this is part 2 of Profane Origins.